Hi, I'm so glad that we get to share this pretty amazing topic together. I want to talk about the energy of where you grow up and how it actually determines energy within your whole human energy field, because it's a fundamental and quite defining factor for many people. So let's wait a little bit until there are more people joining. Hi, Eliza. I see you, and others coming on now as well. So it's wonderful. And as ever, I would love you to ask questions on this topic, the energy of where you grew up and how it affects you, because it can be a really big determinant in how you live your life. And of course, the big challenge is you may not know that it's a determinant there. Hi, Laurel. I see you there. I grew up in Cornwall after the first few months of my life. I grew up elsewhere for those very first few months and then came to Cornwall. And it's fascinating how this land grew me. And that's really what I want to talk about, how the energy of the land that you grow up in, no matter what that is, it might be a city, might be a town, the countryside, wherever it is, how the energy there can really make a difference. Hi, Carol, Kathy. Nice to see you too. When I lived in Canada, my husband's Canadian, and when I lived in Canada, I lived in Cape Breton Island. Beautiful, beautiful island, and amazing people. They're very generous, very community based, very, very loyal and wonderful people. And of course, the land there where we lived had been mined. And at certain places, there were 7 seams of mining underneath any point that you were standing on. And of course, at that point, that's going to really affect the energy of the land. So perhaps some of you grew up in mining areas as well. And one thing I want to say is that there's no bad land. Yeah, there's no land that would not have nourished you. Wherever you grew, you were nourished by that land. But to think of the character of it, to think of the spirit of that land and how it affected you as you grew and continues to affect you, that's what we're going to explore. Eliza, you ask a great question. You're saying, what time period are we talking about? I lived in multiple places and continents as a child or young adult. So the time period is really going to depend on which ground kind of claimed you. And I suspect for you that you can identify one place in all of your moving where you actually felt, this is home. And it's a different relation to the other places that you also grew in. So for those of you who are very traveled in your young life, then I'm going to invite you to think about the place that you called home. And it might have changed. You know, that if you stopped traveling when you were in your teenage years and settled into one place and now maybe have lived in one place for 10, 20, 30 years, I'm sure that that place feels like home now, especially if you didn't have strong roots growing up. But there'll still be somewhere from your childhood growing that, for me, when I see a land kind of claim someone, it's that the energy of the land encompasses the energy sphere of the human. And from that point, there's going to be an amazing communication between the energy of the land that you're growing in and your growing system, your energy system. So, Eliza, I suspect that there's a place that you felt claimed by, that you felt a connection to. So that's where I'm talking. All right. What about living in 3 different places over 14 years, Peggy? My answer is exactly the same, yeah? Which of those 3 different places do you think of as having influenced you growing? Because that will be one, they all would have influenced you. Every single place would have influenced you because of the energy. You think about for a second your human energy system, yeah? You have this amazing energetic core that moves from beneath your feet right through your own human body system and up above your head. And that amazing core of energy brings in energy from elsewhere, especially the energy from above your head. We could call that the cosmic energy or the heavenly energy, and the energy beneath your feet. And this is where the key part is, because it brings in messages, information, coding, ways of being from the earth. And there are lots of reasons for that. So let's think a little bit about that. One of them is that depending on the energy that runs through that land, that's going to inform you with certain storylines in your body, certain myths. Here in Britain, I live in a place that is very strongly Celtic. There is some evidence that the Vikings came here at some point, but they kind of touched on the land rather than came and settled for a long time. But I only have to move an hour's drive away, and I get to areas that were Viking, so Norse and Celtic, for decades and decades, generations and generations. So then that living in close contact with the land, with strong stories, strong myths, strong cultures, strong associations with certain deities, then that's going to inform the quality of the land that you're living in. As well as that, of course, many of your ancestors will be buried in the place that you grew up. Of course, that's not true for everyone. For those of you who are writing in now who traveled a lot, that probably isn't a truth. But for many people, they would have grown up on land, and I don't mean the one patch of land, but within a radius, that actually that land itself was nourished by the body, the bones, and the blood of your ancestors. And honestly, even if they're not your ancestors, they are our living ancestors. At some point, it's pretty indisputable that the people of the place that you lived in, at some point way, way, way down the ancestral line, would have been in contact with your ancestors or one of them. So then when we start thinking about the way that that ancestral body, ancestral blood, bones, have actually nourished the land there, then we begin to get an understanding of the incredible richness. We can call it really the spirit of the place that we grow. And if we take that as a concept, that land has its own energy, and if we take it one step forward, that in some way that energy is able to be not just absorbed by our body system, but that it influences it. That actually, I always think of land as actually growing us. We can understand that without the earth, we really are nothing. There is no other place to live. This earth has given us our bodies. It's given us our life. So between the ancestral earth and the ancestors that lived us, then actually there's this amazing energy field that surrounds us as we grow. And don't worry if where you grew wasn't your ancestral home. It was somebody's ancestral home, and there were ancestors in that ground. So now, before anyone's freaking out about thoughts of specific ancestral energies being in the ground, I want you to think of it more as the spirit of the place, that all of its history, all of its stories, all of its wars, all of its experiencing in that patch of ground that really kind of identifies itself as separate. So it might be a city, it might be a town, it might be a county. You're going to be able to resonate with those words in different ways. You might be able to say, well, I come from a certain county, but I'm not one of those townspeople or those city people. You have a sense of identity, a sense of other. And for a moment, ask yourself where that comes from. Does it come just from the people that are living in the city or in the town or in that particular village? Or does it also get carried in the stories of the earth? And I want to suggest to you energetically that it really gets carried in those stories. And so we grow in those stories, just as we grow in our family stories, just as we have certain ways of being and knowing and interacting with each other because of our family rules. It's the same as the land that grows us. So you could think of certain places as really bringing forward strong people or tough people or funny people or lusty people. And a lot of that is the way that the culture of that particular place is influenced by the energy of that land. All right, let's see if there's some questions that you're bringing forward. Let's have a look. Tatiana, you bring forward something very important here. I feel a deep soul sickness, an inability to connect to the nourishment of the land ever since I immigrated from Europe to the US. I would love to feel connected in this new land. It's been over 20 years, but I haven't been able to. All right, I really want to speak directly to that because I'm sure that there are more of you who also feel the same way. So one of the most beautiful ways to bring that healing into where you're living and connection into it, that speaks of a disconnect. You've left something, you're now somewhere else, and the land's so different, and probably the culture's so different as well, that you can't find your sense of belonging. And that will most probably be because the rules of belonging in that country, in that land, in that part of the country where you live are very different from the rules of belonging. The energy of the land will be very different than the one that you grew up in, the one that you call home, the one that you feel you belong in. And there are beautiful ways to weave those two energies together so that actually your individual, your human energy system can rearrange the jigsaw of your energy field slightly differently so that actually you can find the way to connect really beautifully. You said as a deep soul sickness. So there are really ways to bring that deep soul healing into the land that you're living on now. You can actually be part of really bringing forward more nourishment to that land. And in turn, that then really begins to nourish you. So one thing I would suggest, there's two really different ways here. One is that you take a pilgrimage back to your land of belonging, so the place that you grew up. And it can be beautiful to take a sacred journey. That's the definition of a pilgrimage. It doesn't have to involve hardship. It can simply mean that you say, I'm going back to my homeland. I'm going to honor that land. I'm going to be with that land. I'm going to suck in all of the strength, the juiciest. I'm going to get that amazing, deep soul nourishment to heal this sickness. So that's one part of that. The other part would then be, how do you bring that beautiful soul nourishment back so that where you live now, and you say you've been there for over 20 years, that actually you bring that back. Now, there are so many ways to do that. And I really encourage you, if you're able to take that pilgrimage home, that you actually really ask those questions once you're in your own country, once you're on your own soil. Sometimes you could take just a couple of teaspoons of that soil back with you. You could offer it to the ground where you live, maybe the ground around your home, to say, this is my familiar. This is where I really understand. This is where I connect with, and I offer it to the land that I now live on. This is an offering so that I can connect into this new land, this new place. Maybe you don't even call it home yet. 20 years is a very short time if you don't feel connected. So you can offer it to the land and begin to be in communication. What does your new homeland need of you? How can you walk it consciously? Can you plant some things to nourish it? Can you talk to the land around you and say, thank you for supporting me? I know we haven't quite got along so far, but I would love to honor you. Simple ways that actually your energy system can begin almost to reach out tendrils of, let's say, curiosity. That those tendrils can kind of move towards the ground. And when you've been able to communicate with the land beneath your feet, then those tendrils are so willingly received. There is an amazing non-judgment to any land. There's an embraciveness. So that would be one way that you could work. Now, for some of you, it's not going to be possible that you go on a pilgrimage home. And maybe it's not possible now, but it's something that you could think about for upcoming years. So then you work with what I've already mentioned as far as looking for ways to connect to the land. One way, it's very simple but very powerful, is to observe the people that that land has created. that the energy of that land has helped support in its growing. Observe them and ask yourself, what is it that you really respect about those people? And sometimes you're living in a place that doesn't click with you, that you can't find that nourishment on. Then actually that can be a difficult question, because oftentimes if you don't connect with the land, if you don't connect with the energy of where you're living, then it can be difficult to connect to the people because they will hold a similar energy. But let's take an example. Maybe you live in a place now, a city now, where people are hustly and bustly and very in your face, yeah? And you grew up in somewhere very, very different than that. And I'm not talking to anyone specific here, I'm just talking an example. And you find it difficult to find your connective roots in the place that you're now living. And you find people brash and abrasive, and it's a struggle for you. Then actually it's about asking yourself, what do I respect about these people? Well, they're amazingly forthright. Okay, that's a quality. What else do I respect? They have a beautiful lust for life. Sometimes I can't match it, sometimes I can't understand it, but I really notice it. So when you begin to respect let's say the product of the land, it's amazing how quickly your energy field can begin to find the beauty in the energy that is all around you, and especially beneath your feet. That aspect of the ground beneath your feet is really important, because that brings in your stability, your trust, your resiliency, your deep understanding that no matter what comes in your life, you have the ability to feel supported by the ground beneath your feet. That's what's so important about being able to connect into the land that you are living in. Now, for some of you, you might know that where you are is a very, very short-term staying. And this is a technique that I've used as I've traveled around. And some place when I traveled, I loved and I could immediately connect to. And other places, it felt so different from my own energy field, so different from my norms, my ways of being, that even though I could honor and love the ground beneath my feet, I couldn't understand it in any way. And if I needed to draw strength in, then I'm going to share with you a really simple technique. And this will speak especially to those of you who don't live in a place that you call home. And you can actually, so let's all do something together, no matter whether you love the ground where you live or not. Let's just take a moment, kind of allow the words I've spoken just to filter through your awarenesses, filter through your energy field. Take a breath. And for a moment, feel the floor beneath your feet. And if you're lying on a bed or got your legs crossed on a chair, then just tune in to the floor. So the bottom of the house or building that you are currently in. If you're in any floor other than the ground floor, then allow your awareness to drop through the walls down to the ground floor, and from that place to move deeper again into the ground beneath the building that you are currently in. Just allow your awareness to be there. Maybe it's close to the surface of that land, maybe it's deeper. And for a moment, just perceive what that might look like, feel like, smell like. What does it feel? Is there an emotion in that land? Can you give gratitude to that land? Can you say thank you? Every day when I leave my house, I stand on you. Thank you. Thank you for supporting me. Bring to mind a recent walk that you've been on where you felt nourished or joyful. Maybe it was a walk where you cried, and yet you knew that the trees around you were witnessing you. and that the ground beneath your feet remained constant. And for a moment, you're going to stay breathing in that place of gratitude and awareness. And you're going to allow the understanding that you can drop from that place that you're currently sitting in awareness all the way down to the center of the earth. An amazing, amazing molten core. And that from there, you can take your awareness all the way back up, right to the land that you know grew you, the land that you call home, the land that nourished you, that listened to your laughter and celebrated with you, that listened to your tears and held you. The ground you took your first steps on, the ground perhaps where your loved ones maybe took their last steps. And feel gratitude to that piece of land, whether that's a town, a city, the country, a special place of trees, wherever it is for you. And if this place is not the place where you're currently living, then take your journey once more back to the molten, beautiful heart of the earth. Maybe blow a kiss to that heart as you move through it in your awareness and come all the way back up to the piece of land where you're currently living. Back up, the awareness of the floor of the building that you live in, all the way up to your feet, your legs, your beautiful body, your head, your arms, your eyes. And when you're ready, you're going to open your eyes and recognize that you just connected the place that you love, the place that grew you, the place that your energy field really understands to be home, to have part of a parenting, a nourishing parenting energy to you. You just connected that land with the land exactly where you live. And you can do that at any time. And maybe for some of you, you went down to the core and came straight back up to the land where you live, because that truly is the land that you know grew you as well. All right. Let's see if there's any questions. Okay, I think some of them, a lot of these questions we've already been working with. Yeah. So lots of you talking about places that you really just loved going home. So beautiful. I feel like that that way of being able to give gratitude and honoring the land where you currently live. And if you need to, if it isn't the place that you long for in your soul, because it is such a deep longing, isn't it? A few of you are writing about it, that there have been places in your childhood, some of you are mentioning it's not even perhaps where you grew up, but places that you felt an immense connection to. So that's a little bit different when you get that sense of visiting a place and really knowing that you have a connection. That's a beautiful, beautiful sense of belonging. That's not quite what I'm talking about, the land that grew you, but my goodness, that's a powerful way to empower your energy field to know that you can always go back to that place that you loved so much, or like we just did, that you can go down through the earth and come back out with your awareness in another place. All right, well, I feel good doing that. I'm living in Cornwall again at the moment, so I'm back in my home county, and I'm not Cornish. My family are not Cornish. I moved here when I was a few months old, so it doesn't have to be your ancestral home. but it can certainly be that land that totally wired everything about your energy system. All right, we have galloped through this topic, and of course there is so much more to say about it, but out of respect of your time, I'm just seeing if there's anything else that has come in. Ida, hi, I see you and say you really needed this today. Well, I'm so glad that you got to experience it. And that's the techniques I've used a lot as I've traveled. Maybe I just need to connect deep into my own power, my own sense of wellness, my own sense of courage. Yeah, when we grow in a land and it feels like we have a connection there, it really holds some of those places that can hold us strong when we feel wobbly. Yeah, the ground beneath our feet is always solid when we're feeling happy and buoyant and vibrant. It's when we feel shaken, when we feel vulnerable, when we feel scared, that relationship to the ground beneath your feet gets so important. So anytime you need to really just call on more strength, more courage, then being able to drop down in your awareness and really experience the nourishment of that land that loves you is amazing. All right. Much love to all of you. Thank you so much, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.